It's the heart and soul of American music, WHVW, Hyde Park.
Live at 5. It's Roll on the Radio, coming to you with the strains of Mr. J.J. Cale and his miraculous guitar, one step ahead of the blues. Well, it's a beautiful late afternoon, early evening. Dear listeners, I hope this finds you well. And it's, I say, a beautiful early evening. That's if you're in our area and the Mid-Hudson Valley and you've been enjoying this wonderful Indian summer and beautiful fall. But if you're on Jupiter or in Afghanistan, and I believe you could be, and you could be listening to us if you're tuned to WHVW.com or .org or .net, but most likely .com, you will be hearing us beautifully wherever you are. If you're in our area, you might be listening to us on AM radio, on 950 AM, and if you're close by, reasonably close by, if you're driving up the thruway, you'll catch us. You can hear us also. But we are available via your computer. You go to WHVW.com, we'll take you to the station's website, and you click on the link that says that you should listen in. And you'll hear us, and you'll hear myself, your host, Carey Harrison, the Bishop of Woodstock, as usual, every week. I have a wonderful guest this week in the form of a neighbor. Not everybody has a neighbor who's also a genius. I, in fact, have two, maybe more. My guest today, Fred Hand, guitarist and composer, a resident guitarist at the Met, happens to live opposite his cousin, who will one day grace us, Cousin Stevie. I know there will be a moment when we will want to meet him, because he too is a genius woodworker, and I think he's soon going to go public once more with his work, and we will have him here, although we'll be obliged simply to describe to you the beauty of his work. It's always frustrating. We do have marvelous visual artists on the show from time to time. If they have a website, then it's great. Then I can refer you to that. And in fact, we're fortunate with Fred Hand. He not only will give us something to listen to, but also you can go to his website and see some really superlative photographs, images of Fred playing, which make you wish you'd become a musician if you didn't, and fill you full of envy if you did. Fred, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
It's wonderful to have Fred here. He's sitting in the armchair at Studio C, which is a wonderful option that we now have, and it has an armchair in it. That's really one of its most joyous aspects. It makes me very happy. I have to look across an expansive studio to see my guest, but that's really fine. And it's such another lovely room to be in, something that our station owner, J.P. Ferrara, specializes in finding us cozy places in which to work. And we're here thanks to Tommy Grasso, editor of Roll Magazine, rollmagazine.com, now exclusively online. Roll Magazine, one word, ROLL. Go there for information about the Mid-Hudson Valley and all kinds of activities, artistic, musical, theatrical, financial even, and also to see beautifully illustrated articles and to read them. It's a wonderful online magazine, an absolute paragon of its kind. And I will, at some later point in the hour, remind you of some of the things that you can find online in, as it were, the current issue of Roll magazine. It's always there, it's constantly changing, and it has the advantage over print magazines that there is an archive that you can look back, and you can even see some pieces of mine about writing and about my novels. But you can see many interesting things, and in fact, a number of our shows here, our Roll on the Radio shows, are available in the Roll on the Radio archive. That is one of the links that you'll find if you go to Roll magazine, and I hope there will be many more soon, including this very show, because the chance to record Fred is something I can't resist. He will, I know, explain to us that for various reasons what he would like to do today, it's actually a wonderful thought, is improvise for us. And I have, it's like open the magic box. I've been asked to write 3 notes. Of course, I might have put in it unknown, like the note H, which would have left him. Well, I suppose
that's a freebie. Then I can use whatever I want for that one.
You can start the scale again. It is the problem when you're playing somebody's name in musical notes, but I've tried to offer 3 reasonable, sensible notes, and at some point he will play for us, and we will also hear some of his recorded music. But I would like to go back in time-honored fashion to Fred's beginnings as a musician, if he can face repeating this. You started very early as a musician?
I did start early. My mother took me to a concert of Andres Segovia, the great Spanish guitarist, when I was 6 years old. And after the concert, I told my mother that was what I was going to do.
Oh.
And she said, yeah, okay, fine. I said, I'd like to have a guitar, please. And she didn't take that quite seriously. But she did bring me back the next year for another concert, and same thing happened. And at the age of 9, she finally relented and bought me a guitar. And I became a guitarist. And that's the whole story. And that's it. We're done.
We're done now. That brings us to the present day. But it makes me want to ask you, as with so many disciplines, do people start a lot earlier even than that?
They do now. They didn't then. The guitar as a classical instrument was really, other than Segovia and a few other people, really in its infancy as a classical concert instrument. Now the training, with Suzuki methods and stuff, they start them at 3 years old.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
That's all begun, and the violin was the groundbreaker in that, and it's begun in so many different ways. And I mean, with other artistic practices, painting and writing, people can start very early without needing an instrument to play,
Right.
which makes all the difference in the world. So, in fact, not allowing you to stop at the age of 9 with your first guitar, but where did you go from there?
Well, I should say before that, I did start singing in a children's choir. So I had a musical background, and it just so happened that the conductor of the choir, this was at the Brooklyn Museum's children's choir, was an amateur guitarist. So he started teaching me at 9, and very quickly he realized that I was approaching his level, and then referred me to his teacher, who was a concert guitarist. So by the time I was 10, I was actually studying with quite an accomplished musician. And,
wonderful!
Yeah, but I'll tell you an interesting story about what happened, because you mentioned my cousin Stevie, and this is cousin Stevie plays a part in all of this, because when we went to get the guitar at a place in Manhattan called the Spanish Music Center, the proprietor, who did not know me and did not know my interest in baseball, said a very strange thing as we were leaving the store. He said, "Now, don't go putting a baseball bat through the side of that guitar." And what an odd thing to say to a little 9-year-old boy who he didn't know. As it turned out, I loved baseball and was practicing being a switch hitter, swinging from both sides of the plate. And 2 weeks later, I put a baseball bat through the side of that guitar. I took it to repair. Every repairman I could in New York City, nobody would touch it. It was like a mosaic of a little puzzle of little splinters. But I had my big cousin Stevie, who was at that point 15, and Stevie actually steamed a piece of plywood, got it into the guitar under the underside of it, and then like a puzzle, glue those pieces back together.
Oh, what
You
a
saved the
wonderful
day.
story.
Yeah.
Oh, Fred, that's beautiful. And I never knew that. And that allows me to think so fondly of Stevie's beginnings, which became, in due course, a wonderful craftsmanship and artistry. So did it work? Did it play?
Yes. I used that guitar for many years. It was I think a 3/4 size guitar. So when I was about 13, I got a bigger guitar.
I know from the little I know about guitars, I know from my brother, my 10 years older brother, who was a singer and guitarist. He was a singer-songwriter. He sang to his own guitar. He was a cabaret artist. And I know how attached he was, and I imagine all guitarists are, to a particular instrument.
It becomes an extension of your body, really.
Yeah.
You rely on it for the feel and the sound. It's at best, you don't even know where that you're holding and playing it. It's just part of you.
And what I was thinking was that it doesn't necessarily have to be the best.
No, you form a kind of relationship with it, as it were. Yeah.
So at some point, however, you relinquished it for...
That's right. That's right.
A better guitar.
Yes.
But how marvelous. And I mean, one thing that I wanted to pick up, because it just entered the conversation briefly, was your Brooklyn origins. And I've become an adoptive Brooklynite since I teach there. But there's quite a little formerly Brooklyn community in Woodstock, and we form part of that, all of us. So you made very rapid strides.
I did.
At 9.
I did. I think it's just something that I was destined to do.
Yes.
You know, there are times when you see people come into the world with certain gifts, and you really can't explain it, how they know how to do that. And it seems I had some kind of connection with this thing. So,
I believe that totally. I mean, it's easier to decode if you're looking at the case of a Mozart, and you think, well, for various reasons, he was being pointed in that direction, and many musicians do grow up in very much a musical household. Was yours that, or not so much?
Not so much. My mother played the piano, and she sung also in a choir, and it was wonderful in that I was not pushed into it. And in fact, when I was 13, one of my great passions growing up in Brooklyn was playing basketball.
Right.
And at 13, I decided I no longer wanted to play the guitar and wanted to become a basketball player.
Oh, my goodness.
I was already playing basketball, but I quit the guitar, actually, for a couple of years, and I joined the Boys Club of America League, and I played basketball constantly. We lived also right near a playground where I played all day long and then went into the gym at night. And after a couple of years, I should also say I was okay, but I was not a great basketball player. After a couple of years, we went to a New York Knicks game at Madison Square Garden, and I noticed that the shortest player on the roster was 6'2", and I was barely 5 feet at that time.
Well, I wasn't going to mention that. I was going to find a decorous way of saying that without the listeners having to know exactly.
I'm diminutive in stature.
He's not 6'6", I was going to say, and that there are old jokes about Jewish basketball courts, specially made for people who are not 6'6". But so it was clear you did not...
that was an epiphanal moment there. I don't think this is going to happen, you know. And at that point, I started thinking about my future. Right. And went back to the guitar. And but growing up in New York, there was a wonderful opportunity to study music. They have something at the time called the High School of Music and Art. It later on joined with the Performing Arts High School and became what's now called LaGuardia High School.
Oh, indeed.
Which is a special school for musicians and artists and performing artists.
Yes, indeed. And so you were there in the previous incarnation of LaGuardia.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, that's
and that was a fabulous school. They really taught music, I see now, on a college level. So by the time I got to college, I was way ahead of the game.
Wow. Perhaps this will be a good point, because I think we're all stimulated by the idea of your progress. I love to feel that some people do enter the world with an inclination which is totally mysterious, and the science of genetics doesn't really account for it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true.
But I think I came out of the womb with my hand formed into a pen-holding position, and very fortunate we are.
Yes,
those of us
to
whom that happens, that we never have to search for our niche. a wonderful thing. Well, I have powered up a CD. I think I think it's there, and I believe JP, who's watching. I need him to be watching as I do this first practice. This first. Shall I? And there's a pause, and now shall I turn it on?
Yeah.
I'm taking instruction here to see if we can hear the Fred at work.
When you're ready.
So here it comes. What beautiful music. And I was in no position to announce it in advance, but now we have the chance retrospectively to do so. And I hadn't realized for sure that's not only Fred Hand playing on a CD called Jazz Antiqua, but it's also his own composition, and that's become very much a part of Fred's life. Perhaps we should talk about that particular track and then come back to when composing came into your life. But
Sure.
Tell us a little about that track.
That's called Cantigas de Santa Maria, and those are songs that were anonymous songs that were written in the 12th, 10th, 12th, 13th century. You know, for hundreds of years they collected these songs, and these are just melodies, and they're very short melodies. And I discovered them when I was playing with a Renaissance group called the Waverly Consort, and I was playing the lute with them. And I just felt that they were very fertile ground for composition and improvisation, because the medieval melodies are modal and very much similar to the way jazz musicians use modal harmonies today. And in the Waverly Consort, it was strictly a Renaissance group. But when I heard these melodies, it was a springboard for more creative possibilities. And so I wrote this composition, which uses jazz musicians to improvise in certain different ways, not just always on the same chord changes.
I was going to say, what we heard there was improvisation.
Yes. You heard a mixture of composition and improvisation.
That's what I thought. How beautiful, Fred, and how lovely to have a fusion of these things. So when did composition come into your life right away?
No, it didn't come in right away, but I was interested fairly early on, but never really studied it for a very long time. And I was also very shy about when I studied in college, I was studying as a classical guitar major, and at that time, composition students were playing and writing the most avant-garde music, much more so than today, actually. I mean, completely cacophonous. And without making any judgment about it, it was not something I was interested in doing. So I felt rather I was an innocent, and I didn't even show my compositions to anyone until I discovered that there was this whole little subculture studying, and they were writing in the style of Ravel and Debussy and Mahler and Copland and Barber and Stravinsky, and I said, that's what I want to do.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah. That makes so much sense to me. How beautiful. Well, this is great. So, and we should perhaps touch on your relationship with groups and orchestras and different institutions, places that you've taught and so on, because your life has been distributed between those different things. I guess.
That's true. That's true. It's so interesting the way a life unfolds, and you couldn't possibly predict. As a result of me getting interested in improvising in early music, and by early music I mean Renaissance and medieval music, I was performing with a group called Calliope, a wonderful Renaissance group, and it turned out that the percussionist in that group, who was actually the person that ran the group, along with his wife, played at the Metropolitan Opera.
Huh.
And the time came when the Metropolitan Opera was doing a production of Francesca da Rimini by Sandonai that used a lute. And they asked my friend, they said, well, who should we get for the lute? And he recommended me. And I walked out on stage at the Metropolitan Opera, and the first person I saw was Placido Domingo.
Oh, my God.
And the second person was James Levine. And I looked at those two, and I said, and I also, I'm looking at the Metropolitan Opera House, I'm on the stage, and I think, this is great. Wow.
But,
right. Who could have predicted that became a 30, I've been with them 30 years now.
Yes.
What a wonderful thing to have happen.
And where did you, what age were you when that began?
By that time, I was well established in the music business. I was actually in my mid-30s.
Right. And Julian Bream came into your life at what
Well, that
stage?
was interesting, because Julian Bream came into my life when I was about 15. Before then, I was strictly dedicated to Segovia. When I say dedicated, I mean he was the reason I played the guitar. He was the only guitarist I really listened to and admired. Right. And then Julian Bream hit the scene, playing the lute, by the way.
Indeed.
As well as playing the music of Benjamin Britten and all sorts of modern, wonderful new pieces. And I just completely turned in that direction. And I just loved the way he played. And in fact, I wound up even starting to talk like him, which my Brooklyn friends gave me a real slapping in the face about.
I think I want to hear that, because whatever you can remember of it, Julian Bream came to my boarding school to
really
play.
Oh,
well,
my goodness.
we had sort of distinguished alumni, and he may indeed have been one. And we had some wonderful people would come and play. And so I remember the look of him, and I remember his voice especially well. And that was a thrill for us. And I must say, I've never been able to separate his name from the lute in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, what a genius, and perhaps the greatest musician to ever play the guitar. I mean, I would say yes.
Wow.
But it turned out that when I was about 19 years old, he was giving a master class in Stratford, Ontario.
Right.
And I auditioned, and he accepted me. And that's where I first encountered him and started studying with him.
Oh, wonderful.
Which was a wonderful experience. And then, not too many years later, I graduated from college, and I was already teaching at the college level, but I really thought that, wow, wouldn't it be great to have more study? And I had been in touch with Julian Bream, and I called him up, and I said, would you teach me if I could get a grant to do this? And he said, oh, why, of course. Like, why would you even ask?
Right.
And so I applied for Fulbright, and I got the Fulbright.
Oh, boy.
And I had just gotten married, and I gave up my job at the University of Connecticut in my New York apartment, and my wife and I moved over to England. We went to the Fulbright orientation meeting in London, and I called Julian Bream, and he said, well, hello, Fred, how are you? What brings you to London? And I just was like, oh my goodness, well, I'm here to study with you. He said, with me? All of a sudden, his voice became very Cockney, and he had just totally forgotten about the whole thing. So I had some, I would say, very scary moments. But after we sorted all that out, he was as generous with his time and wonderful. And I did, in fact, get to spend a year studying with him.
Oh, how fabulous. I can't think of anything better. We are here with Frederick Hand, guitarist and composer, resident guitarist at the Met for 30 years. I hadn't realized it was as long as that. And my neighbor by wonderful chance, and a delightful fellow who comes over to swim in our backyard pool from time to time with his cousin Stevie, and we form a little gang on the road there. So very lucky to have them both, and very lucky
as
to have
are
Fred.
we. As are we to have you as our neighbor.
That's very kind. It's certainly been wonderful ever since we moved in, a great joy for us. So we're listening to Fred Hand, and this is live at 5, or it's 5:28 now, Roll on the Radio, with your host, Carey Harrison, the Bishop of Woodstock. And we're here through the good offices of Roll Magazine, now to be found online, Roll Magazine, one word, ROLL, rollmagazine.com. And this, you're listening to WHVW. You can find WHVW.com on your computer and get perfect sound. If you're not getting it by listening on AM 950, if you're close to us. So that's who we are. And since our sponsors have wonderful things, that's to say Roll Magazine, to offer currently, I simply want to catch you up with a couple of these things. In successive recent weeks, I've mentioned that there's a wonderful article about Burning Man, which, unlike most of what you can find on Roll Magazine, has nothing to do with the Mid-Hudson Valley, but as some of you may know, is an extraordinary event out there in the Nevada desert where you can go and strip off and dance naked on the sands, or in extravagant costumes, and you can go and dance around bonfires and spend time just getting out all your jams, if that's how you feel you should do it. It's a wonderful event, known to a number of people who regard themselves as addicts, as graduates of Burning Man. And if you don't know what that is, or when or where that happens, rollmagazine.com is the place to go. Now, we have some wonderful art to advertise, local art. I've mentioned the exhibition called 50/50, which is a collaboration between husband and wife, two marvelous artists, Mark Cantor and Heather Hutchinson, who've never previously exhibited together, and their wonderful work. Each does very different kind of painting, but they're magnificent, both of them, and they make a wonderful foil for each other, and that's to be found at the Woodstock Framing Gallery, and I recommend that very strongly indeed. There's a fine article by Donna Calcavecchio in Roll right now about a new gallery in Stone Ridge, relatively new, very upscale, called PS 209. And it has a very interesting exhibition coming up, or else it's already begun. I'm looking down at my notes here. And it runs from, October 11. Well, we're right on time, through November 16. So you have a few weeks to find it, but it certainly sounds as though you should. A number of marvelous artists, Christopher Kurtz, Martin Purrier, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. He's well enough known that I ought to know, but I don't. P-U-R, and then Year, Y-E-A-R. And it's his printmaking, I think, that the exhibition concentrates on, although he has made many different kinds of art, sculpture in particular, and Jeff Shapiro. So this sounds like an absolutely superb exhibition, and Donna writes, all three of these artists are singular, yet all are well-schooled in traditional maker techniques. And this conversation between different kinds of work, prints, sculpture, and ceramics, creates an elegant conversation, an interaction of clean, organic, and sometimes functional form. It sounds simply wonderful, as described by Donna, and if you go to rollmagazine.com, you'll see beautiful illustrations which will entice you. I'm sure you'll want to go. Also happening now, I think opening this weekend, is an event that we celebrated a year ago. It's been going, I think, for 5 years. I think this is his 5th year. It's an event called the O Positive Festival. Quite unusual. It's a festival dedicated to interaction between medical practitioners and artists. And it's interested in creating a bridge to access healthcare for artists. And if that sounds very specialized, it really isn't, because it's a gigantic carnival of art and music, not to be missed, in Kingston. And the best way to discover what it is, the O Positive Festival, that's like O with a plus, like a blood, O Positive, is to go to their website, which is Kingston/O Positive Festival. That's O, just the letter O, Positive Festival, one word, opositivefestival.org. And there you will be able to access all the events. It's essentially a celebration of art and music and wellness. And this is a wonderful and intriguing idea for a festival. Doctors have always been so closely allied to the arts. I think of the number of great writers who were also doctors. It seems as if the doctoring profession is much closer in spirit. There's a kinship between doctors and the arts. I'm sure I know some doctors who have absolutely no kinship with the arts, having said that, but there does seem like a history. And I can think of many writers to whom that applies, and I'm sure the other arts as well. So this was a wonderful idea, and in fact behind it also lies an intriguing concept that if you're an artist, you can trade art for health, for medical treatment. And when you think over the ages how ignored artists who were subsequently in most cases recognized as marvelous artists traded their work for food, I think that to trade it for health would be an equally good idea. And here is a vehicle for this to happen. So I'm rather excited about the O Positive Festival and recommend it very strongly to you. I'm wondering whether we might not come back into the conversation with Fred Hand with another piece of his. And I have bravely put another of his CDs into the slot, which doesn't mean I'm going to bravely succeed in getting it to play. It's a CD called Solos. Maybe we should talk about it a little before we play it.
Sure. Well, my composing, not always, but usually involves the guitar in some fashion. A lot of that is just simply that I need to write myself apart.
Quite
in
right.
the concert.
What a good idea.
And as the title suggests, this is an album strictly of solos, and I believe the piece you're going to play, if it's the first piece, is called Samba. And what I would just say about it is that anybody who plays the nylon string guitar or the classical guitar can't really help but falling in love with the music of Brazil. It's just a natural thing to play on the guitar. And this is my expression of that, as it were.
How wonderful, Fred. Well, let's hear, provided I succeed in making it audible to you. how beautiful that was. That's simply called Samba, and there was so much to notice there for me. I loved overall the incredible variety of moods that in those 4 minutes you take us to so many places, and that's what's wonderful about a composition like that. It doesn't force, having found a groove, it doesn't keep coming back to it. Mm-hmm. You keep moving on to other moods. Mm-hmm. And the sweet reference to Bach, I might even have noticed it. I think I might. And it's so lovely. But what an exquisite piece.
Oh, thank you.
Fred, really, what a joy to hear it. So I wanted to ask you, although I'd love to dwell on Brazilian music and sambas and Brazilian culture generally, but I'm curious to ask you about teaching, which has been a big part of your life, as it has of mine. And I never was taught anything remotely to do with writing, and even the literature that I teach, I don't remember anything positive about classes that I took. But have your teachers, have what you experienced as a student of your particular teachers found their way into your teaching practice? Oh,
very much so. Yeah. One of the biggest influences, aside from the two great guitarists who I mentioned, Segovia and Bream, when I went to college, at that time, as I mentioned, the guitar was new as a concert instrument, and my teacher was an amateur guitarist, but a virtuoso violinist. Huh. And so I had the opportunity to study with a great musician as opposed to just simply a guitarist. And I don't mean to be so pejorative about a guitarist, but at that point in the history, guitarists were not great musicians for the most part, aside from just a few. And I remember him singing things and playing things and saying, "Now play it like that." And I said, "Well, that's very difficult on the guitar." And he said, "Yes, that's your problem." But it was sort of tough love, because It actually forced me to think like a musician and not just how to play the guitar,
Well, that makes so much sense in every way, but also in the light of your composing.
Yes.
That there you are composing as a musician and not just as a guitarist, mm-hmm. in fact.
I should say about the composing that my best friend in high school was a wonderful, and it still is a wonderful jazz pianist named Andrew Laverne. And he had a tremendous influence on me because he opened my eyes to a whole other world. And in fact, when I came time to apply for colleges, I was really torn between going into classical or going into jazz. And the thing that put it towards classical was just that I was actually really, at that point, experienced and accomplished as a guitarist, and jazz more of a novice. But the experience of playing jazz with my friend and listening to all the John Coltrane and Miles Davis and Bill Evans and Freddie Hubbard and you name it, is that it found its way later on, years later, into my music, and still does. It's just very much a part of me. So that was a wonderful influence, aside from teachers who you're talking about.
Well, that's right. It's so interesting because I realize that I come out of the same listening culture as you, and that Segovia was such a huge figure mm-hmm. for me in my childhood and my youth. And I guess everything has spread out and become more complex and more available, and newer artists and so on and so mm-hmm. forth. But he towered over everybody, and I'm conscious of that.
He did. And as I said, that for a while, that's all I really wanted to do. Yeah. Somehow after, I would say in my mid-20s, and it was actually as I was studying with Julian Bream, I became aware of the fact that and this is not in any way negative realization about Julian Bream, but I realized I did not want to become Julian Bream. Something else was going on inside of me.
Right.
And it had to do with playing jazz, it had to do with writing music, it had to do with improvising, it had to do with expressing myself in whatever ways were coming forth. And that's when I became actually serious about composition and sought out teachers to help me. I didn't do a lot of study, but it was interesting that initially I studied with classical composers. Mm-hmm. And what I would say is that they were quite wonderful and I learned a lot, but I don't think they to a large extent, really understood where I was coming from.
Right.
That is to say, the jazz part of it. And then I met a fellow who's studied at Juilliard. His name is Kirk Nurok. He now teaches at the New School. And Kirk did Broadway. He did films. He's a classical composer. He did it all, right? And Kirk heard my music, and he said, okay, good. Play that again. And he kept making me play it over and over. He said, here's what you need to do right there. And he just totally got it.
Wow.
And wow, when you find someone that resonates on your wavelength.
Absolutely.
And what a help he was. And even though I studied with him a very short time, great influence. And I wound up working with him, and he actually did a Jazz Antiqua tour with me.
Oh, Fred, I'm so envious. Writers are out there in the forest very much on their own.
Yeah.
You know, we read the writers we admire. We sit down and try and write not necessarily like them, but inspired by them. And all that comes out is our own stuff.
Well, don't you think, let me ask you this in terms of writing, because I feel very strongly that this is what happened in music. I listened so much to, as I say, the music of Samuel Barber and
Yes.
Aaron Copland and Leonard Bernstein and Ralph Vaughan Williams, and you go on and on. And that music then came out when I wrote in a personal way.
Yes.
Sometimes not personal. Sometimes I looked at that and I said, oh my God, that's plagiarism. I can't use that. Because I was so in love with the sounds that they
Yes.
made. I think it's pretty. I don't think we create things in a vacuum. You know?
It's true. Although this is a much larger conversation, the problem with writing is that it's so close to thinking, and therefore it's harder to form one's writing thoughts in accordance with the beautiful writing that you admire. It tends to come out more in accordance with your own thought patterns.
That's
and
interesting.
It's hard to do anything about that. You pray that somehow it won't come out too badly. I'm about to spring on you.
Oh no!
The three
the dreaded
notes,
three notes.
The dreaded three
I
notes.
better get my guitar out.
Right. So as we speak, Fred is about to discover which three notes I've set him, and here we are exploiting and enjoying his jazz skills and his jazz affinities by asking him to improvise on three notes. I'm so glad I'm not in the chair being asked to say, discuss the weather as if you were Samuel Beckett. Actually, probably could be done, but I don't want to be put on the spot and have to improvise at all.
Yeah.
So, Fred, are you ready for your...
Well, I am, but I would like to see that piece of paper, because what happens is when I start improvising, I sometimes forget what I'm improvising on.
Oh, totally. No, I'm assuming I will give it to you.
Oh, okay. And by the way, I should say this: I have no idea what those notes are or what I'm going to play, but it's not necessarily going to be jazz.
Ah, well, that's a good point. And I can tell your audience he has not seen these notes until this minute.
Okay. All right. So the notes are A, D, and F. And you've thought about this, or you haven't?
No, I haven't. I did what you told me, which was
good.
simply to put down the first
Great.
three that came into my mind.
Okay, so I'm going to just, first of all, play those notes so that we can hear them. So we have... Oh, how lovely. Carey, you've helped me out a great deal here.
I'm glad the F came along.
Yeah, that was... I'm glad it wasn't F sharp.
Okay.
No, actually, F sharp would have been fine.
Well-
What I meant was... well, actually, I don't know what I meant, because it's all good.
It works, doesn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so here we go. So I'll just play them for a while and we'll see what comes up.
Wonderful. Oh, my goodness, Fred, how beautiful. I'm so happy we have that recorded, because I was so moving. The music was so tender. I kept thinking, and listeners will forgive me for this slightly macabre thought, I'd love to have that played at my funeral. But in fact,
I'm not really quite sure what I want to say. Maybe nothing.
but it's so elegiac and so lovely. Oh my goodness, I can take no responsibility, alas, for it, except for the chance of those three notes, which really did work out wonderfully well. Oh, good, we've got that. I want that. I want that to be played. I'm terribly proud that that's what came out. It was like a blues.
It was partly your composition. You know,
well,
you wrote the first three notes.
But how gorgeous, Fred! Oh my goodness. Anyway, there is a world premiere. Listeners,
I'll ask you to title it for me. Okay,
I'd like that. Oh my goodness, what a thrill! Gosh, Fred, and I'm slightly overwhelmed and don't know where to go from there. Except back into your story. Do you have mountains as yet unclimbed? Do you have plans?
I do have plans. I have this year, for the first time, reduced my teaching schedule to 1 day a week, which allows me to compose a lot more. And the Maverick concert series in Woodstock has commissioned me to write a piece for their centennial this summer. Oh. And I have to tell you, and I'm sure you've experienced this as a writer, that I wake up each morning and I can't wait to find out what happens next. You know, exactly. I have no idea what's going to happen next. And so that's how I'm spending each day, looking for. And this is a piece that I'm writing for flute and guitar, and the flutist is the iconic and legendary Paula Robeson.
Oh, wonderful!
Who will be playing a whole concert together.
Wow!
So that's coming up. I'm also going to be doing a concert at the 92nd Street Y in New York, along with three other musicians who are also guitarist composers, and we'll all be doing our original work.
Oh. How marvelous. I'm delighted to think of you devoting more and more of your life to that and being able to. I know how much time, and not just time by the clock, but how much of your life and how much energy teaching can take out of you. I'm afraid I shouldn't confess this on the air, but over the past 20 years in the same teaching post, I have got better and better at conserving my time and my energy.
Yeah.
When you start out as a teacher, it kills you. Partly the amount of work you set yourself, and partly the anxiety that the classroom can make you feel. And then as time goes by, I've found, I'm sure you did, I found myself more and more relaxed in that.
Sure. For me, at this point, it's the travel that kills me.
Yes.
The teaching is easy. It's the travel.
That's right. It is a little like that for me, except that I was going to say unlike you, but I imagine you could sit with sheet music on your lap and work, but
the state troopers discourage that when you're driving up the thruway.
Well, I was thinking that you would be composing in your head and notes on paper rather than playing. Although how nice.
That does happen. Does happen, but most of the time I'm listening to something on the radio.
Well, that's right. I mean, if you did play on the train, what a wonderful thing. Some excellent writer recently suggested to me, a poet, I think, that we contrive a poetry on trains project, which simply involved leaving your book on the train, that people would find a book of poems.
How lovely.
It's rather a nice idea.
It is a nice idea, yeah.
If my latest book wasn't 700 pages long and more suitable as a doorstop than something that you'd take home to read, I would take part, but I'm prepared to disseminate their poetry volumes. And in that spirit, it's poetry on the train. It's a great idea. Yes, there's the travel. I'm happy for you that you're not, because you're doing a fair bit of traveling.
I was teaching at 3 different colleges. Yeah.
We did meet at one point. We tended to meet up for an Indian meal when you were coming back from Purchase.
Yes, that's right.
Which was a wonderful gig. And but how nice! I'm thrilled. This seems to me to be happening at a wonderful time in your life. It's the same for me. I'm thrilled to be able to devote so much of my life of my time to writing at a point in my life when other people are maybe slacking off or not feeling as fertile as you do, I know, and as I do.
Do you find, as I do, that by having the discipline to have a certain amount of hours in each day, and saying this is what I'm doing now, whether you're feeling creative or not, that's the key. Just doing it every day, and then you have the continuity. My difficulty before was that I would work for a day or so and then have to go away, and it seemed like I was starting all over when I come back.
I think it's key. I'm fortunate to have a child of mine, my youngest daughter, writing her first novel, and I've been impressing on her how the hardest but most important thing to do is to work on it every day.
Yes.
Even a short period of time.
Sure.
It keeps the plant alive. It just waters the plant. And it's dangerous once you leave it without watering it. It loses touch with its own roots, and that happens very easily. But it's something that you learn. Fred, what magic to be doing this show with you. This has been the perfect show.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's so great enjoying what you're saying and then getting to listen to wonderful music at the same time. I hope maybe at some point, especially if there's a new composition that you might play for us, we could invite you back.
Sure.
Again. That would really be wonderful.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, Fred, this is so great. And listeners, if you caught this, you will be able to catch it again, I hope, on rollmagazine.com. And if you didn't, maybe you'll come across it there and you'll think, I'd like to listen to that. It was a wonderful privilege. Fred, thank you again. Listeners, have a happy and safe evening.